Hey, y'all, it's Rocky. I'm back with another episode, which will probably significantly be shorter. Because I'm just going to be briefly talk about a manga. A manga. Did I say manga? Of course. A manga and a webtoon, not in that order. So, I want to talk about this one awesome webtoon that I came across looking for something online to read, and I was looking at recommendations. And apparently, this is a very popular webtoon, which in Korea's Naver Webtoon is called True Education, while its English variant on the webtoon site is called Get Schooled. It was produced by YLab and written by Youngtae Che and illustrated by, I'm probably going to kill this name, Garam Han. Its original release date came out in November 2nd, 2020, and it's still ongoing. Season 1 just finished not too long ago. But before I talk briefly and cautiously about this webtoon, there are words I'm going to avoid because of YouTube's word topic censorship issues and whatnot. The disclaimer is that it's pretty heavy. There are topics covered that many might find triggering and or disturbing, along with plenty of explicit language, although like F-bombs and the MF words are implied. They're partly covered up with like asterisks and stuff. But originally when I was reading it, they didn't cover anything up. But I guess as you move along, it's somewhat censored. So just a heads up for those who aren't a big fan of peppered profanity. So at first, when I was reading the first couple of chapters, I thought it was hysterical. It was hilarious. I'm all for justice, and this kind cracks me up. I do have a somewhat dark and odd sense of humor, so to me, it kind of fits. The story follows a dude named, I'm going to kill it, Warden Hwajin Na. And I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. Hwajin Na. A retired Special Forces captain that started to work for the Ministry of Education. The issues occurring in the school system began with the passing of a law that basically protects the rights of the students from aggression or physical abuse by teachers, right? Sounds like a no-brainer. However, the tables turn, and these POSs of teens have been abusing, harassing, and even physically attacking teachers with the threat of reporting them and having them fired. So, in real life, being a teacher in Korea is considered an important and kind of like honorable role. So losing your job and having a rotten reputation can be scarring because you might not be able to work as a teacher again. So it's almost like going to school for nothing, right? Just because kids want to be jerks and they lie. So it's similarly implied here as well. So the other major problem going on in this school system, in this webtoon, is the rise in bullying and violence. And with it, another problem that's based on a law where anyone under 14 cannot be prosecuted because they're minors. So you can commit a serious crime like murder, and if you manage to go to juvie, you'll barely do any time. So, bearing all this in mind, the Ministry of Education decided to open up a division called the Teachers' Rights Protection Agency, or TRPA for short. I call it TERPA, personally, but whatever. They send Jin, since I can't pronounce his name, he's going to be called Jin from now on, out to one school at a time to tackle the mounting issues that are being reported, and most of it, of course, is bullying. Many of these schools' administrations either do not have a grip on things, the kids are ruling the school, they are corrupt as all hell, or are being pressured by an outside source or influence to keep things under the down low. So, as I mentioned, down to the bottom of a case where students' intense bullying caused another student's, how shall I put this, self-demise. Mind you, all the topics and themes mentioned are very realistic because it's relative to real life. So TERPA's goal is to teach these kids a hard lesson on what it's like to be bullied and face real consequences to their actions. This is an attempt to make them understand, reflect, and change their ways. But at times, this includes corporal punishment, along with other forms of consequences. Jin carries a rod of sorts, and whenever they mouth him off or they try to physically attack him, of course he fights them, often literally whooping their butts. The way this is displayed is comical. Now, if you've ever been around students or just nasty teenagers, don't you sometimes wish you could just clobber some of them? Like you look at a kid and you tell yourself, they need a serious whooping. Obviously, not everyone will understand what I'm saying because some folks are patient and would never even fantasize about clobbering a lying, disrespectful, manipulative teen. I'm not that person. I fantasize about it. Never done it, but man, I wish I could have. Okay. So the majority of this season was based on the premise that a problem persists at a school, the warden visits, the kids change or pay high consequences, and then he moves on to the next mission. However, with plenty of arcs that take place, this isn't a regular theme. Before I get into that, I want to say that later on in the series, Jin acquires a female co-worker, the infamous Hanrim Lim. She happened to serve under Jin in the military, and being in special forces, Harim was such a warrior soldier that she was given the nickname of Baba Yaga, basically a sort of female John Wick. Even though Jin is also a retired special forces captain, she still calls him by his rank. So now, as I previously mentioned, it's not all pink tutus and roses with school bullying. There are other social issues and situations within the arcs outside of school bullying. For example, a female student causing the self-demise of a teacher based on false allegations of harassment and inappropriate sexual conduct. Teachers bribing and abusing other students and their parents, while corrupt administration turn a blind eye. Issues of parents harassing and emotionally abusing and falsely accusing teachers. And a countryside town so corrupt they managed to get away with unbelievable crimes for years against newcomers and especially female teachers. And then there are stories about Jin's personal encounter with people he ends up intervening for outside of his job, like domestic abuse, and really all kinds of abuse, including SR/R of minors at home, and the terrible exploitation of runaways who experience a terrible home life. These minors, of course, is kind of tied in with Turpa because they can't go to school, and they're not just about defending teachers and defending kids and teaching a lesson, but also they're trying to help kids get an education, like be able to stay safe and go to school. Again, there are some heavy topics in the series, and the author always begins every chapter with a disclaimer because of it. There is also a very personal matter as to why Jin is doing what he's doing. The series does introduce the president of the Ministry of Education and the one responsible for the Turpa organization, Choi Gyung-seo, and the connection that he plays with Jin as well in the creation of the Turpa organization. One funny thing about Gyung-seo is that this guy is raw. He is ill-tempered. He's been in politics forever, so he absolutely abhors reporters, and he shuts them down in such a raw, messed up way that it's really hilarious. It's like reporters are terrified of him. But overall, I really, really, really enjoyed this piece. I really love the themes of justice and vindication, almost all the time, and I'll explain that later. But the fact that, it does work out makes the topics or whatever less depressing and worth discovering what happens next. The storyline is so well written, it might even have you binge read it before you know it. That's assuming these topics are not triggering for you. Also, it's not that easy to assume what will happen next because it's not that predictable. There are moments that will catch you by surprise. There is no full-on nudity or gore. All the SR/R mention is mostly implied and not actually depicted in details of sorts. So, blood, yes, because bad guys are getting beaten up, noses are being broken, some are getting shanked, etc. But personally, that's not my idea of gore, but rest assured, people are not being sawed in half, or again, SA being graphically depicted. As for the artwork, I feel like Garamham catches great details with the realism of the characters and backgrounds. Their other works include Neolithic Girl, which I have not read, but I've seen some of the art in it, and it does have a different sense of style. Simple lines, light colors, and pastels that seem to be similar to like a mix of Josei Sword Sojo kind of art styles of sorts, if that makes sense. Anyways, Get Schooled is a different beast. So the colors, details, realism fit the webtoon. The author had also written Housekeeper, which is a sci-fi, and the action webtoon Reawakened Man. Now, the webtoon production company, Forget Schooled, YLab, seemed to have some excellent and impressive content. They don't just go through the creative process and publication of a piece, but also produce video content for other companies. And they also have a school called YLab Academy for those would-be webtoon authors and illustrators. Of course, only in Korea, but hey, that's kind of amazing. So, one final interesting note about their webtoons. YLab creates sets of universes from their titles. The shared universes of these webtoons fall under 3 categories: Super String, Blue String, and Red String. Get Schooled falls under the second universe, Blue String. According to YLab's website, the Blue String universe is, quote, based off the lives of teenagers and people in their 20s. It is the story of the youth who's facing the reality as they grow. Characters from various webtoons represent the color of the youth, blue, in their own way in this universe while maintaining the differences, end quote. Except for Gene, because if I remember, he kind of hints that he's in his mid-30s. Anyway, that wraps up Get Schooled. And before I forget, there's an ongoing joke among fans that Gene looks like Aizawa from Boku no Hero, and in some scenes, he really does. He's just cuter and looks less like a sleep-deprived drug addict. Sorry, Aizawa fans. Anyway, if you want to check out Get Schooled, of course, you can go and read it for free on Webtoon. There are 111 episodes in Season 1 with Seasons 2 still in the works. I am going to link a YouTube video that happens to be in Korean under the Webtoon channel in the description box, so you guys can kind of look and get a feel for the main character and stuff like that. It's just freaking hilarious for me. Anyways, one last thing. I came across a manga last month that also dealt with the topic of a sort of vigilante forcing justice on unredeemable creeps that either got away with their crimes or they didn't serve enough time. This manga, which I will not attempt to recall how to pronounce in Japanese, is called in English Brutal Confessions of a Homicide Investigator. It's also known under Brutal Criminals the Law Can't Judge Deserve the Finest Death. That seems much more accurate. It was written and illustrated by Koga Kei and Aizawa Ryu. It has 5 volumes out and was released in 2019. I believe it's a sequel to another series, but it's basically about a very handsome homicide detective, Hiroki Dan, who has an obsession with the 1973 Exorcist movie. He's also a serial killer whose motive is to see justice served. He's basically Dexter. If you know, you know. I read the warnings and still went in to read it anyways. Reason being is that there were plenty of times the disclaimers were not as bad as they were made out to be. But of course, everyone processes things differently, so I decided to give it a try. And I was so wrong. Instant regret. I love a good justice piece or vigilante, like I said before, like, the anti-hero types kind of thing. But, bad guys getting theirs is always fun to read or watch. This series does just that, but in the worst, grossest way possible. There are depictions of SA/R that are very detailed and very disturbing. The punishment incurred on the criminals are equally disturbing. Of course, it fits the crimes committed, but it doesn't make it less disturbing and graphic. I abandoned ship and decided I'm outie. Again, I love these kinds of themes, just not laced with heavily detailed acts of violence. And I mean, it was more than I can handle. If anyone is into that kind of stuff, you might want to check it out for yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you. If anyone is sensitive to these topics, it's a no-brainer. Stay the hell away. Anyways, again, I recommend you guys reading True Education / Get Schooled. And that's it for this episode. Until the next one, take care of yourself, be good, do good. Ciao.